Hello and welcome to the little video that goes before you start Lab 3. So this week we're going to kick off loops. Loops are one of the more challenging things. Not that the loops themselves are that complicated, but figuring out how to use them for what you're trying to do is a bit challenging. So in this lab we're just going to go over the syntax, just making a loop and using it to do some simple calculations. So why loops? Well, loops are really going to become critical in your upper level courses such as mechanical engineering, numerical approximations, intermediate dynamics. Most courses that do any programming are going to require loops. They're how you do calculations with equations that don't have closed form solutions. So we'll learn a little bit about for loop and a little bit about while loop here. The basic loop format is really simple. It just says for your index variable equals these values in this array. So this is a little different than Java and C++, which do a set your index variable to be this, increment it by this, and so on. You can kind of read that as the same way, but if you're used to Java and C++, take a moment to notice this is a little bit different. So here's our most basic for loop ever. For k equals 1 to 10, we're going to print out I have n loops, and you'll notice this k shows up here, this k shows up here. So we're going to run our script. So I'm going to set a breakpoint down here by clicking on the little line over here. And then we're going to run to that line. Okay, let's go look in the command window and see what happened. It says I have 1 loops, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on. So this printed this out 10 times, once for each value of k. All right, let's take a look at a simple if statement. So if statements are used for when you say I want to do this if this is true and that if that is true. So let's do a quick example here. So if we run here, we set x equal to 6, and we ask, is x equal to 5? And the answer is no. So MATLAB jumps to the next else statement. It says, is x less than 5? No. So now we ask, is x greater than 5? We say yes, and then it prints out that if statement, and we go look at the command window, and it says you put a number greater than 5. So now if we stop and rerun, and we'll set this to be 4 this time, and we ask is x equal to 5? It says no. It asks is x less than 5? It says yes. So now we skip all the rest of this and we just print out you put in a number less than 5. Ta-da! So those are really simple if conditions, if a number is less than or greater than or the same size as. And you notice the only weirdness here is that x, we have 2 equal signs here. So if you want to say is x actually equal to a number, you put in 2 equal signs, not 1, because 1 equal sign in MATLAB says take this number and assign it to this one. So if you want to do a comparison, you have to put 2 equal signs together. Let's look at a slightly more complicated example. So there are other conditionals you can use. So we have not equal to 0, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. We can also combine statements with ands, ors, and nots. So an and statement says if this is true and this is true, then go ahead and go in here. Or says if either one of these is true. So what we're going to do is do a little bit of logic here. So we ask, is a equal to 1 and b equal to 1? If those were both equal to 1, which they're not, then we would have ended up in here. But because although a is 1, b is not 1, we don't end up in here. But on the or statement, when we ask, is a equal to 1 or b equal to 1, that is true because a is equal to 1. Now we can ask a different question. So either a or b is equal to 1, but not both, because if both of these were equal to 1, then we would have ended up in here. So now we can ask which one of these is 1. So we'll ask if a is not equal to 1, then b must be 1. No, that's not true. So a is not equal to 1. So let's try this one. Is b not equal to 1? Then a must be equal to 1. So these can get arbitrarily complicated. I always try to break them up into pieces if at all possible. A little bit of shorthand. So when you say something like foo is equal to 1, anything that is not 0, MATLAB considers to be true. So bar is equal to 0 here. So if we ask is foo true, we could set foo to be anything. We could set foo to be 16 or 17 or whatnot, and it would evaluate to be true. The only thing that's going to be evaluate to false is if it's 0. One last little bit of syntax, that's a while loop. So a while loop you use when you aren't sure how many times you're going to go through a loop, but you do know when you want to stop. So in this case, what we want to do is as long as x is greater than 1, we want to print out what that number is. Then we need to change this x variable somewhere in this while loop, or the while loop will never end, and then you will have to hit Control-C to make your program stop. So here what we're going to do is we're just going to make x get smaller. So as long as x is getting smaller, eventually we've got to get below 1. So let's run this. So x is 10. So we check if x is greater than 1, and we print out it is. Now we decrement x by 1. So now x is 9. X is still greater than 1, so we come back through here. This time through, x will now be 8, and so on. If we continue, then when we are done, what's x got to be? X is 1. So there's a quick example of for loop, if, and while. In this lab, you will go through and write your own for loop, your own if statement, and your own while loop.